Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much, Chris, offering to very kindly co-host today, and also Jessica, a lovely guest. And we've got Miral here, acting behind the scenes, looking after everyone. Basically, we should have just gone live on Facebook, which I can see has just happened now. Officially, we don't start till 5 o'clock British summer time. So this is a bit like the pre-show. So what would be really good in just a moment or two, there's no rush, but what would be really good is if people could introduce themselves in the chat. Be fantastic. So basically just tell us what you're really passionate about and what you really care about. And whilst everyone's just doing that, what we'll do is perhaps just chat to Jessica for a moment. So no pressure, Jessica. We were just talking about the lovely picture on your wall. Because you used to do some training with wolf cubs years ago, didn't you? You were telling me, I think.
Yes, that's right. Well, it wasn't wolf cubs. It was cubs, but it was also the adult wolves as well. I got interested. I mean, I've always been interested in wolves and dogs and animals and stuff. And someone had some wolves in the area that I live in Bedfordshire. And so I went up to see them, and I did a few kind of events with them, and then I said, you know, these are public events for teaching people about wolves, because it's basically for their conservation. So the more we understand and learn about them, then they're seen as the big demons of all the fairy stories and stuff. And I said to him, have you ever done any corporate events? And he said, oh yes, we do a corporate event, but it was more the same as the other one, just a bit more expensive, you know. So I said, well, why don't we do a corporate event, in the sense, treat it as leadership and the wolf world, you know, wolf and leadership, because there's a lot of similarities between wolves when they're in captivity and people when they're in an environment of similar captivity, like in office spaces or whatever. And we took it from there, and it turned out to be incredibly popular because we did it on site. Everyone had to sign a disclaimer up in the car park before they came down. And then they'd greet the wolves and everything through the fence. And then we do a whole session of integrating with the wolves and learning about their hierarchy, only in captivity, because they don't have that hierarchy in the wild any more than human beings do. It's not like that at all. We only have all those levels of hierarchy in captivity. We don't have them in the wild, neither do wolves. They do have alphas, definitely, and they have the omegas right at the bottom, who usually get bullied and not used for anything, except the only time they have status is when the alphas, which are the only ones who breed, have cubs, and then they're used as a babysitter, so they're untouchable during that time. Wow. That the cubs are being brought up, so even they have their day.
God, that's so scary working with wolves as well. So I'm going to introduce Chris in just a moment, and I just wanted to make sure, because officially we're not starting for another minute and 30 seconds, but if anyone's already on live at the moment, this is a bit of a pre-show, as it were, before kickoff. But if you'd like to introduce yourself into the chat, and just confirm you can also hear audio okay, and also see us okay. It should be streaming out through Periscope, YouTube, and Facebook simultaneously. So just type in the chat. It'd be really nice to know we're not alone, and it's just the four of us. So it'd be really good to hear from you. But Miral, in just a moment, if it's okay, what I'll do is I'll move you down so you can just monitor things behind the scenes. Obviously, just let me know if anything crops up. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So Chris, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I just wonder if the live comments are working at the moment.
I'm just wondering about that. Maybe I'll just have a look in Facebook as well, see what's going on there as well. So actually, I can see for some reason it's not feeding through. Actually, I'm having to look at another screen here. I can see Chris Waters is with us. Also Anthony. I think I've got that right. Hopefully. Actually, just bear me a second. Let me have a quick look. Yeah. Actually, no. Yeah.
Splendid engineering.
Yeah, good. Lovely. Thank you very much. No, splendid. Yeah. So it's always a bit nerve-wracking. You're never quite sure whether everything's technology is working as it should. Right, we're going to be starting in 5 seconds. So we'll get cracking. If anyone else is just arriving now, if you could just very kindly introduce yourselves through the chat. One person has very kindly volunteered already. because we want to encourage lots of engagement as part of this. And Jessica is our guest today. Chris is very kindly co-hosting this with me. Paul, lovely. Malcolm, good. It's all working. Brilliant. So keep it coming. So what we'll do then is Mira, if I could ask you to just drop out for a few minutes then and monitor things behind the scene, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that's fine.
Lovely. All right. So basically, it's very much welcome to this show. It was myself, Chris, and Jessica. And if you could introduce yourselves via the chat, keep that coming. We'll come back to you at different points as well. That'd be absolutely brilliant. So I'm going to just quickly share my screen on a couple of points so you know what the agenda is today. So give me a second. And in fact, I need to press another button here. Let's bring that in. There we go. So, right, there we go. Right, that's a little bit better. So we started officially 1 minute ago. We've got Jessica Richards with us today, and also Chris. What we plan to do is, as part of today, if you could just introduce yourselves a bit like you're doing at the moment, tell us what you are passionate about, why you do it, and how you like to make a difference. That'd be great. And moving on from there, just a very brief introduction about myself. I'm a stereotypical entrepreneur, I guess. Don't always get things right, like most people who are running a business. You very much learn by what you also make mistakes on, as it were, and we makes us a lot better and stronger. One of the things I feel very passionate about is the importance of circular relationships, where it's a true win-win, not just a win-win, but actually you're looking at all the suppliers, your staff, the associates, the partners, the introducers, everyone that you work with, and try and feel everyone good about that relationship. Chris, do you want to just say a brief introduction about yourself here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Chris Cooper. My business is Chris Cooper, but the kind of strapline is business elevation, because I work with companies, leaders, teams, and really help leaders develop themselves, elevate themselves, their businesses, and build really highly engaged workforces. That's my passion. But also, I really, for 9 years, I've been a sort of content provider and a broadcaster. So I freely provide content. I'm the host of a show called the Business Elevation Show on Voice America for 9 years, where I've interviewed thought leaders and experts from around the world. Hence Jessica, and another great guest, and Neil Lawton, who we talked to last week. And I'm author of a book called The Power to Get Things Done, whether you feel like it or not. And that's me. Lovely.
Thank you very much. Now over to Jessica. Would you very kindly tell us a bit about yourself? Obviously, we'll properly introduce you in a moment, but if you want to just give us a brief introduction now, that'd be lovely.
Yeah, I'm Jessica Richards. I'm a professional speaker. I specialise in personal transformation, leadership development. I do a lot of one-to-one stuff, group retreats and things, usually with senior executives and leaders. Had a practice in Harley Street. I've been there about 29 years now, until the lockdown.
Wow. And you're going to no doubt be teaching us some really good survival techniques, which we'll learn about very soon, Jessica. So we'll come back to you in just a moment, Jessica. So in terms of just a little bit of clarification today, just to make sure I stick to what I promised I would do. Some of you may have actually had, a lot of you should have had an email yesterday and today, which was headed up Lies, Damn Lies and Statistics. And it's very much picking up on what came out as part of the announcements yesterday from the, now we're not suggesting our statisticians, by the way, are lying, but it was basically suggesting that the economy had only shrunk by 2% in the first 3 months this year. I think we know it's probably been a bit bigger than that, but that's probably because they're looking, everything's a bit of a time lag. But also a bit later on, we're going to be talking about things like the bounce back loans and also other strategies you can apply in your business now. We won't be visiting this just yet, but these are some of the questions we've actually had in advance of today. So we're going to do our best to try and answer some of these. And ones we can't, obviously we can pick up separately afterwards. We can book a call in with me and we can do our best to do it. But at this point, what we'll do is we'll introduce Jessica in just a moment. I'm just going to very quickly pick up on some of the comments, so we could just see that there for a second. So bear me just a moment. I've just got to press the button here when I. Sorry, I'll wait a second. Just made a mistake on something. I'm trying to figure out how to hide it, but I can't figure out how to do it. Okay, so Malcolm's very kindly introduced himself. Thank you very much for that. So comments. We've got Paul Wiseman, so from the USA. So I'm guessing in Boston it's about midday today. So welcome, delighted you've been able to join us. We've also got Daniel. Daniel, welcome on board today. Thank you very much for joining us. Lisa, lovely, nice to see you again from this week. And of course, you're only about 3 miles down the road from me. Phil, welcome. Right, okay, so we can see you here, Phil, and it's coming through. So thank you very much for joining us. It may be a bit of a Facebook thing, not 100% sure. Michael, I'm delighted you've been able to join us again today. And thanks for sharing that information. Farron, lovely, delighted you've been able to join us as well. Jessica has got lots to share, so Farron, I'm sure you're going to enjoy that. And no doubt we'll be catching up on different things throughout. So guys and girls, keep on introducing yourselves via the chat. And I'm going to go back to Jessica in just a moment. Just maybe a second. So Jessica, over to you. Let's give you a proper introduction because we have got another slide that does that. Sorry, won't be a second. Not as well rehearsed as I thought it was going to be today. There we go. So Jessica, these are the topics we plan to introduce. So Chris, can I let you take over at this point, if that's okay?
Absolutely. And just before I introduce Jessica, I'd also like to say a thank you to Neil Lawton, who was our guest last week, who I thought shared some fantastic thoughts and ideas on resilience. An amazing man, led over 50 expeditions around the world, and adventurer and entrepreneur. So thank you, Neil, and congratulations for. I think he mentioned that he was doing. Oh, there he is, listening in too. He mentioned that he was doing a 100-mile cycle on his static bike on Saturday for a charity, because Neil's always doing something, and of course he achieved that and raised lots of money in the process. So well done, Neil. So. I'd like to say a big welcome to Jessica Richards. I had the privilege a few weeks ago of being introduced to Jessica through a mutual friend, John Kramer. And therefore I'd love to thank him too, because I thoroughly enjoyed my exchange with Jessica. And I think we had this conversation, planned the interview, and found ourselves talking for hours since. And it's been really some really fascinating exchanges. And I really felt with my conversations with Jessica that she got some really useful, helpful insight around the current situation at the moment. But also her work means that she is helping people at a very high level to sort of change their limiting beliefs. Rupert mentioned, and Jessica kind of introduced her work and her transformational work, and that she has this Harley Street practice. She's got an amazing kind of interesting background as well, from actually I think as a child living in a car at one stage, through to setting up all these interesting different businesses, through to the work she does today. She's also, one thing I found fascinating was she was voted in the top 3 speakers of the decade for the Academy of Chief Executives. That's no mean feat. And I think another thing that Jessica is become known for is that she's a cancer survivor. She had a very serious diagnosis 13 years ago this week. Congratulations, Jessica, for being here today. That's even more special reason. She wrote a real groundbreaking book on the topic of cancer that's helped many people to deal with this situation. So, brilliant to welcome you today, Jessica.
Thanks, Chris. Every day above ground is a bonus, as they say.
I love you. I love your plain speaking. It's great. And so let's what we're going to talk about. Obviously, we're going to talk about the COVID situation. We'll talk about limited beliefs. We'll talk about how to overcome them in the new world. And Jessica, tell us a little bit about where's home, and how have you been living during lockdown? What's been going on for you?
Well, I'm actually based in Bedfordshire, so I'm getting terrible withdrawals from London because I've been in and around London like all of my life. It's where my family come from, so that's been very strange. But I'm based in Bedfordshire. I'm in lockdown. I did have a spider in lockdown, but that's now died as well. But So I'm spending my time basically doing a lot of stuff like this. Doing a lot of my work now has gone online, which I never expected I would be able to. If you'd have asked me that before COVID, I'd have said, oh, no, it's not the sort of business you can do online, but actually it is. Virtually any business is. And I'm also a local volunteer, so I've been out and about picking up prescriptions and doing shopping and stuff like that, and keeping fit, because we've got time now, haven't we, to do a few sessions a day instead of one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, just tell us a little bit about you. You know, you've had this very varied background, and you've had multiple businesses. You've been property development. You've been practicing Harley Street, and you had this real life-changing, situation around cancer. And I'm really interested to maybe you could tell us a little bit about that sort of a background and how that shaped you, but also your perspective on the current situation, how you perceive things. And hello to everybody, by the way. For some reason with the technology, I can't actually reply to people while I'm doing this, but I can see all the comments. Rupert can do that. I can see all the comments coming through, but lovely to see those. So Jessica,
hello and welcome to everyone. It's lovely to know that you're there, and it's not just us yakking on again like we keep doing. So the cancer thing I'll just put to one side at the moment, but the reason that was a bigger sort of story is because I've never had any drugs or any medical treatment at all, or surgery. So that's why to still be here, and I don't call it surviving, I call it recovering, after 13 years. But the rest of the story was really what created my own Groundhog days, which is, we were homeless and potless a lot of the time. So you kind of get addicted to that, having nothing and then managing to sort of get out of it again and then getting back into it again. And you get addicted to thoughts and emotions which create chemicals in the body. And whether they're good or bad, we get caught up in a cycle of addiction, which is a bit like, we've all heard of like adrenaline junkies. It's exactly the same thing. We get hooked on a kind of a chemical fix in our bodies when we get in certain situations. And for me, the Groundhog one was, or my personal Groundhog one was, back in '63, it's Christmas Eve, we've literally been driven to a children's home. And this has a good ending, so it's all right, we can cheer up. Because I see people's faces drop when I say it, but it has a better ending. But anyway, at the last minute, my father kept getting out of the car. There were 7 of us at the time, kids, and my father kept getting out of the car, making frantic phone calls, and then coming back to the car. And he was a Del Boy type of person, and he kept coming back to the car like distraught. And it's the only time first time I saw my father cry properly. And but then the last time he got back in the car, completely changed. And someone had lent him a deuce, he said at the time. So we had some money to buy some food. We turned around and went home again. So he managed to make it happen at the last minute. So that became my pattern. I was 6 years old at the time, and that became my pattern. I got addicted to the high of going right up to the wire in businesses, personal life, everything, when you cannot go any further and your face is squashed on the wire and you're done for. And then the high of going, wow, and pulling something out of your pocket. But the problem with that, and we can get, good feelings that create Groundhog days or bad feelings that create Groundhog days. But the problem with that is that became my program. So I had to keep creating these drastic situations that brought me right up to the wire in order that I could have the high of finding a way out. But it was unconscious. I didn't know that I was doing it. So it was no accident, I suppose. It seemed like it, that I got into buying and selling properties. If you want to go up to the wire and really have to fight to get out of it at the last minute by the skin of your teeth, property will do it. It's one of the best for doing that. And so that's where the Groundhog Day came from. And that's what I've noticed in other people. And I ended up, I got a scholarship and I went to the States. And he said something on that training. He said, because I realized I've got to a certain age, I was in my late 20s at the time, and I thought, at the time, I wasn't the worst looking person in the world, and I certainly wasn't the most stupid person. But I thought, I keep going back to nothing again and starting all over again, going back to nothing, doing miracles out of the hat, you know. He said something to the class, and he said, I don't put people into trances. He said, I wake them up. And it suddenly was like a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, I somehow hypnotized myself that that's the cycle of life. But in reality, I knew that that cycle, like any groundhog cycle, which is born of addiction, really, is, even if it's an addiction to adrenaline, if it's an addiction to being a victim, or whatever other addiction we've got to that goes on with the thoughts and feelings that we have and the chemicals it creates, that very cycle is an evolution. It's not a revolution. So we are doomed to repeat it in ever decreasing circles as we get older, until we just can't do it anymore and we fall off our perch, we get ill, or something else happens. And that was about 36 years ago, and that's what led me to what I'm doing now. I just couldn't put it down. I just became utterly obsessed with it, and I started working on myself. And then over the years, I developed what is now known as changing the Groundhog Day. And that's what I work with, and that's what I teach, and that's my day job as well. I do the one-to-ones in the clinic in Harley Street, and otherwise, and now I'm doing them online, even group stuff online. So that's where it came from.
So it did it come from the movie, the Groundhog Day? Was that the?
Well, no, the title did, because that was a funny thing, because that's part of our vernacular now. But when I first watched that movie, I mean, the romantic side of it totally went over my head. Because if any movie has even got anything to do in the title of it's a rom-com, I don't even, it's not even on my radar. I wouldn't even waste a second on it. But there was something about that movie that struck me again to the core, where they had that, it was a nasty piece of work, and he kept repeating the same experience every single day, and he got nastier and nastier because everything was about him. And when everything is about us, it's fear-based, and it closes in our world, and it closes in your business, it closes in your relationships, it closes in your reality. And it's a fear-based, and it's all about me, 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 me. And he got nastier and nastier until suddenly it dawned on him that if I'm going to have this day for eternity, I'd better make it a nice day, a better day. And he changed, and with that, everything opened out. He broke out of the Groundhog Day and broke out of everything that had been restricting him. And the metaphor of that just stayed with me. Hence, the work got called Changing the Groundhog Day, because I thought that's exactly what it is. We create our own Groundhog Days, and we get entrapped and imprisoned and constrained by them.
And there's this period that we're going through at the moment with COVID and lockdown, and it's a real momentous period in history. But I think it's an opportunity to look at ourselves, isn't it? And look at those kind of patterns of behavior, and maybe emerge out of the other side, or within this new world, whatever that may be, in a in a different way. And I certainly, with my clients, and I experienced this myself, of a bit of a pattern through life, which was, I'm not good enough, so I need to keep improving myself. And that was really, really, that took me to quite high levels in business and corporate business. But it gets really exhausting, and I see that pattern running with a lot of people I talk to. Whether I just attract them, I don't know. But I think would you suggest it's a good time for us all, and to maybe help our clients too with identifying some of these patterns, so that we can blossom on the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say one thing about that: how we keep driving ourselves to be better and do this and do that. That's sort of part of a Groundhog Day, because what I've noticed, that the very qualities that make a business or make an individual successful at some point will be the very qualities that hold it back. So you will see that there's cycles in businesses. The very qualities that made that business very successful, if they keep on going around the same cycle, at some point it will start to cause a problem. So then they choose a new CEO or whatever. but they're going around the same cycle again. So things will change very slightly, and the same on a personal level. So when you get a good entrepreneur or business leader, the very qualities that made them so successful at some point will hold them back. It becomes a constraint. Most people and most businesses settle for that, and they just fight the fire every few years. They fight another fire every few years, and round and cycle it goes. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But some people that listen to shows like this, or they join peer groups and stuff, they want to go beyond that. And I always say it's a bit like the difference between a really good sandwich shop and Pret. You know, there's just one just goes beyond the constraints of a sandwich shop, and they have a whole different ethos. And I'm not saying I'm a fan or not a fan. I'm just saying that kind of a principle or model for a business. And people get like that as well. We can get to a point we want to go beyond our own self-imposed constraints, and we've got an opportunity now. We've had an enforced reset, whether we like it or whether we don't. We've all had to stop the world and get off, and we can suffer in the getting off, or we can see it as one of the grandest opportunities that happens once in a generation at the most, if we're lucky. This one's probably once in a millennia that something has happened like this. Things like this have happened before, but never before when we have the potential and the awareness that we have at this present time. And we can use this as a chance to co-create and to go inwardly and to create better and kinder selves, better and kinder businesses, and a better and kinder world, which I know is what your ethos is all about, Chris, is helping people to lead and to be kinder leaders and to create kinder businesses. But collectively, we can co-create and make a kinder world, but it has to start with the individual, always with the individual.
And I think you and I have talked a lot over the last week or two, and we've talked about the fact that we're kind of 50 trillion cells within our bodies, and with kind of receptors on them, and taking in information from the outside world, and to then grow, we have to kind of combine with lots of other people to do that. And then there's this kind of part of life which is about fear, isn't it? And which restricts us. But actually, where we really respond is when there's a kind of world which is about love, and people come together. And at this point in history, it feels that we're at a juncture whereby we have to come together in a very positive way to sort the world's problems out. And there's an opportunity. It starts with us, doesn't it? It starts with each individual to be prepared to collectively come together. Yeah.
And strangely enough, it starts with us to become kinder and more expansive, and not allow fear to hijack our lives.
Yeah.
So that we're not so self-centered. We work for the greater good of all. We use our technology to be able to share for the greater good of everyone else. We have an opportunity to do that now. There is no growth without challenge. We have to have challenge, or there's no growth. Nothing grows or evolves without challenge. Now, we can take that challenge and we can see it from the fear point of view, and from the small world, and from me, and say, this has been done to me. This has happened to me. This is all being done to me, and none of it's my fault. Or we can look at it and accept and realize it's actually being done for me. It's for me to actually utilize and grow from it and see the bigger picture. So long as we don't allow ourselves to be hijacked by fear, and not to buy into a collective fear. There's no greater virus at the moment, or deadlier virus, than fear. And that's been with us also, since time began. And it's time for us to recognize there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing whatsoever to fear. And if we behave like that, Of course, there is nothing to fear. It's like when I was dealing with cancer and told, oh, you won't survive beyond 5 years, below average chance. If you don't do all this treatment, you're not going to survive at all, etc., etc. There's a whole wall of fear that can be very controlling. If you buy into fear and allow it to hijack your life, you no longer have free will. You can be manipulated, controlled, not even by people who are evil or anything like that, but just by the fear itself. And you will make bad decisions, dodgy decisions, decisions that are not in your best interest or in anybody else's best interest. So fear nothing. What's the worst that can happen? We're going to die. Well, you know, it's only one cause of death, and that's birth. So that's a given anyway. It's how we choose to live in the interim.
I had a client a number of years ago who said to me, quite a senior guy in a company, and he said to me, he said, Chris, he said, it's really interesting talking to you. You kind of want to help the world and make a positive contribution. And he said, his words were, I don't really give a shit about that. I just want to make as much money for me and my family. And is that a Groundhog Day pattern? Because it's like, you know, I'm going to amass as much as I can because of probably from the fear of feeling insecure and not having enough. But there are so many people based upon making lots of money who are making decisions that are impacting, you know, the world. So is that an example of a Groundhog Day, that pattern of wanting more and more?
Yeah, because that pattern of wanting more and more is always fear-based. I mean, we all like a bit of money, we all like a roof over our head or a few home comforts and that. The problem comes when we become identified with it, that money is us, that status is us, that job title is us. Because as we've seen with this lockdown, it can be gone like that. And then where is this us that was so identified with it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Rupert's just put a question here from Lisa, which is a really, you know, great one. How can we help those that are unaware to become more conscious so they make better choices and stop being at the mercy of their patterns? And that's a good next place to go, really.
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So thanks for that, Lisa. The only way we can do that, we cannot change another's consciousness, because everyone is where they are and where they need to be at any given time, any more than anyone could have changed me or you, say 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It takes a few hard knocks. Usually we learn through challenge and through pain. So you cannot force that on another person. But the most powerful way that does affect others is to demonstrate it yourself. And when people are around you, then if you are genuinely for other people, if you are genuinely seeing a bigger picture and behaving in a way that from your being that is genuinely kind and not a fear-driven experience, people naturally are drawn to that and they start to live up to that. So that already changes the consciousness of another. Just like cells in a body, you know, if there's a cancer cell in there, but the rest of the cells are very healthy, it takes care of it. If there's a lot of fearful cancer cells in there, and cancer cells are basically cells that gobble up all the resources at the expense of the system, even to the collapse and the death of the system. That happens in society as well. So when you get too many of those, well, then it's going to collapse. But when you have healthy cells, it brings up the level of the whole system, so that even if a tumor does take over, if you focus on creating healthier cells from your mind as well as your lifestyle, it elevates the whole system. So you don't have to go into every single cell and get hold of cancer cells and go, why don't you understand? They can't. Cancer cells are just doing what they've got to do. It's exactly like the cells of humanity, of which we all are. So you set the example as best you can. Don't beat yourself up over it, but set the example as best you can. Otherwise, we go into fear again and almost in unwilling judgment of others. Like, well, why can't you be a bit more aware of that? And we've all done it. I mean, it's just human nature. Or why on earth can't you understand that that is causing a problem? Or this is, when we behave like that, as it's human nature to do that, but when we behave like that, we become part of the problem and add to it rather than to become part of the solution. So it's just like in a body, you know, when other cells become like cancer cells and getting aggressive and having a go, well, then you become part of the problem in the system rather than part of the solution. So in short, the only way to assist others with their fear is to not live in fear yourself. When you choose not to live in fear, people automatically start losing their fear around you, and they start to feel safe, and they begin to express their life and their thoughts and feelings more expansively. Automatically changes things.
Yeah, I agree with Lisa. There's lots of fear-based comments in the media at the moment, and it does infect, doesn't it? It actually, it's like positivity infects. Fear infects a bit like a cancer. And I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Should we avoid getting involved in those those?
Don't start joining in with it. I mean, look, I personally don't listen to the news. I have a quick look on my phone so I can just do a quick update for the day. I'm not really interested in anything else. But I can tell you from a human nature point of view why we're so obsessed with bad news and with fearful news, and why we talk about it and we pass it on, and then we talk about it in the street, and have you heard this, and what about that, and what about something else? Bad news and fear sells. It sells, and it sells newspapers. It gets us going online. It gets us tuning into news programs. The media on the TV gets us all talking about it. There's a very primitive reason for that. We're hardwired for it. It's a survival mechanism, and it's fear-based, because in our primitive state, if someone, say for instance, went out and did something lovely with their family and caught something and ate it and it was delicious, we say, oh yeah, that's nice, but it's not really of any use to anybody else. But if they heard about someone who ate a certain kind of grass and all that family died, we'd all, what's that grass? What did they eat then? Where was it? And we want to know every single detail about it. And you notice that when you get cancer as well, people start asking you details. Well, did you smoke? What did you do? And all they're thinking about, they couldn't care less about you. They're just thinking, am I doing anything that might give me cancer? Because it's human. We're hardwired to do that. So that's why we get caught up in fearful news. And that's why they keep the news fearful, because that's all people are interested in. There's been a few efforts in the past to do good news programs and all that. And people go, oh, yeah, that's nice. What a great idea. But nobody watches it. Nobody tunes in. Nobody wants to really know the good news stuff. We might like the stuff about Colonel Tom. It's great stuff. But we're not listening to that 24/7. We're not going online looking at Colonel Tom's life and blah, blah, blah. We're not buying his book and reading his book at the moment. No. We just want to know about how many more people are dead, or what about the vaccines, or what about this, or what about that. We're never going to get out of lockdown and all the rest of it. It's all negative stuff. And if you buy into it, you become part of the problem. And buying into it means you are being controlled by it. Your feelings are being influenced by the media. And that's your choice.
I guess it's about, keeping our heads as others may be losing theirs, isn't it? That, you've talked about that, about actually you can look at everybody else, but actually if we look within ourselves and we do everything we can to, like you are, I mean, you described this situation to me actually this at the moment as a privilege. Once when we spoke about to be living in this era with this opportunity through ourselves and the way we're being, and everybody who's involved in this at the moment. And we can partly counteract some of this, can't we? We can look to turn a negative into a positive, and help spread positivity.
Absolutely. Be positive all the time. Choose to be positive. It is a choice. But another phrase comes from that same poem, is that if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for the doubting too. And that kind of speaks about where we're at now. You know, keep yourself positive, but do understand where other people are coming from.
Yeah.
Because fear is a very, very powerful thing, and it's very difficult to overcome when everybody's talking about it and piling it on all of the time. But keep yourself positive and try not to keep listening to it and repeating it to other people.
Absolutely. One thing I just suggest to people, if you get a chance outside of this, I was chatting with a guy called Corey Blake, who was an actor in the US and has created various adverts and has a storytelling business. So he's an amazing man. He was in the Fight Club with Brad Pitt. But what they've done in his company, they have, to contribute to the COVID situation, they've created something called unitedbycovid.com. So I'd recommend to anybody, have a look at unitedbycovid.com. What they've done is they've asked their clients and asked people to say what they're feeling at the moment during this lockdown, and they've used their artists to turn it into a wall. And it's very moving, but it gives you a real sense of what people are thinking right now. I was very moved by it, and maybe what our customers are thinking. So have a little look at that, unitedbycovid.com. So how do we identify those patterns in ourselves?
What, the groundhog pattern?
Yeah, the groundhog patterns, yeah.
Well, I always say it's when you find yourself in a different place with different people, but you've got the same old feelings or the same old experience is coming round again, then you know you've got a groundhog pattern going on. And it's always unconscious. And these unconscious programs, it's basically a program. I mean, you're not even in it, but the program is there. It sets up unconsciously for a reason. So mainly we need it because we need unconscious programs so that we don't have to learn how to walk and how to talk every single day that we wake up. We've got to start all over again. So lots of it gets put back and it becomes unconscious to us. But other things become unconscious as well, like my having to live in an emergency kind of situation all the time and finding my way out of it. That became an unconscious program because in my experience at that age, life had taught me you need to know how to do this in order to survive. But what happens with the Groundhog program, it creates those situations in order for you to keep playing out the program. So the very behaviors that we put in place to prevent something are the very behaviors that bring it about again in the first place. So we have to become consciously aware of it. A good tip in becoming consciously aware of it, because it's always about self, is if you take something personally, even this lockdown, if you take it personally, you know, how am I going to manage in this? This shouldn't have happened to me. This isn't fair. How this, how that, you know, and I'm absolutely not belittling any kind of struggle that anybody's in. You know, we're all in it to a greater or lesser degree, but some people are suffering real bad struggles during this. But if we take it as personal, then we know we've got a Groundhog Day going on. And if you know that, you may not be able to resolve it right here and now, but you can at least know that's not the truth about me. That's not even me. It's just a program that I don't need anymore. Because if we allow those programs to carry on, then they start expressing in the business as well. And it starts expressing in the workforce. I've always known that when I was traveling around from company to company, as soon as you pull in the car park, you can see the quality of the awareness of the leader of that company. Just as you pull into the car park, immediately you get a feel for what's going on there, as we all do. You know, it's not rocket science. Or as you walk into the reception, you instantly can pick up on what the beliefs are there.
So we're talking about changing beliefs here and cutting through them. Now, there was a comment from. So I'm sorry, I forget your name. You're Splendid Engineering, but great poem. But how do you sell a service that's about change when people are afraid of change? And I couldn't help when I saw that thinking about or knowing about some of your workshops, because you get a lot of CEOs of companies coming to your workshops and actually with quite personal issues,
Yeah,
and are prepared in front of a live audience to be changed and experience change. So I'm kind of interested, do you have any insight that you can share on how to sell and provide a service that's about change when some people are afraid of it, but actually you counter to that. Lots of people come to your events and sometimes they're oversubscribed and they're prepared to go through that change very publicly.
Yeah, but it's not actually a live audience. They're actually holding the space, so it's a collaborative kind of experience.
Yeah.
So we're not doing it as like a spectator event. And everybody avoids change. We have an aversion to change. And I suppose in our primitive state, change was usually a bad thing. There was a disease or a natural disaster or whatever. So none of us like change. But there comes a point in life when some of us, which are the people that we work with, reach a point of readiness for change. And there's only one reason that anybody reaches that point, and in that sense we're all exactly the same, is when we just can't stand it anymore. We've just had enough of going round in the cycle, and we just don't want to live like that anymore. We want to move beyond it, or a business has got stuck in that cycle. We just don't want to deal with that anymore. It's a point of readiness for change. Everybody gets there in their own time, if they're going to get there at all. And it's always when we just can't take it anymore. But the one thing I will say, because we look at the future, if there is no change and one carries on as one is with that program running, there is no change possible that could be anything like as terrible as the future that can be faced without that change. So that in itself can be a bit of a motivator. And it's not my idea of their future. It's their own. It's never mine. I just follow where someone else's consciousness is going. It's not about where I think it will go. There's nothing worse than that. But also, as we're having to learn at the moment, and I learned years ago with cancer, as most people do, you have to be comfortable with uncertainty, because nothing's certain anyway. Having certainty, like, regular income and, the business doing this and the family, etc., etc., there is no certainty. It's an illusion. It can disappear in a split second. There is no certainty. But at times like this, it's brought home to this. Actually, nothing's certain. Anything can happen. Life is not certain. We can be dead within the next second for all we know. So we have to learn to accept uncertainty and see it as just potential. There's always a potential for something else to happen. And so if you're in the right frame of mind, or choose to be in a positive frame of mind, you can create something magical to happen.
Excellent. So before we go to insights and top tips, I'd just like to, I think the next question to kind of move towards a close here with, and Farron raises it, is you identified in yourself a need to change. What are the ways that we can break this groundhog cycle? Once we've identified it, we've maybe got something, people are having multiple relationships and not settling down, or they're it's all about the money for them, or they need to look good and aren't happy showing their weaknesses vulnerably to, whatever that may be. How do we, what are the recommendations you have on, and practical things we can do to smash through that cycle?
I can give you part of the process, because I'm quite open with that anyway. I'm happy to share it. Apart of the multiple relationship things, I think lockdown has probably sorted a lot of that out. Bummer. Yeah, first, just relax. And as you relax, there's a free relaxation download on my website. But get any kind of relaxation you want that suits you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be mine. It can be anybody's, or anything that causes you just to relax quietly alone, where you're not going to be disturbed, and just connect to the emotion. And this is the key to it. It's the emotion. It's not the intellect, it's the emotion. The program is emotional. Connect to the emotion that is common to your Groundhog Day, your Groundhog experience. When you've connected with that, just take your time. If that's as far as you get on your first attempt, doesn't matter. You've got a lifetime. You've got weeks and weeks to work on this. Don't worry about it. You've had this program going on for years. So a few weeks spent working on it. When I work with people, we might do it in minutes, but that's because I'm on the outside of it facilitating. But just go to that emotion. That's the most important part. Once you've identified that emotion, and I mean the actual emotion, not what the intellect thinks, like, oh, it's not nice, or oh, it's unpleasant, or oh, I don't like that, or it's rubbish. That's intellectual. The intellect doesn't have the language of emotions. So if you relax a bit deeper and go onto an emotional level, then the heart comes into it, and you're relaxed enough, and the heart will say, oh, I'm scared. I can feel fear. It's fear that's in those situations, or whatever it might be. And then just have a quick track back at different periods in your life when you felt exactly the same. And don't labor too much over them, but just have a quick check back. And again, this might take a few days, few attempts. It doesn't matter. When you get to that, have a look at what you've done about that over the years. How have you tried to avoid that feeling or compensate for it? What behavior have you put in place in order to deal with that? And just a list, not an explanation, but just, well, I've avoided doing this, or I've held myself back. I haven't done this bit of training, or I didn't do this that I wanted to do, and blah, blah, blah. And when you've got your list, and you can write it down if you want, you can record it on your phone, whatever suits you. And then have a look at what that behavior has cost you over the period of time. And I know we're running short of time now. When you look at the cost, just make a list and then go forward into the cost. And imagine what that would cost you if you were 95 years old and you've continued with that. That's when you get the hindsight now. And that's when you start to see, do you know what? That's the cost if you remain as you are. And then track it back to a younger person in the situation that you were in. Have a conversation. What would you tell them about themselves so that they don't pay the price that you're due to pay? And then ask them the question. You know, we all understand how a young person would be like that in that situation. Anyone understands. But do you believe that they should carry on behaving like that for the rest of their lives at such a cost? And the answer is no. And when are you going to stop behaving like that? And that's 36 years sort of in a nutshell, but I'm happy to share the process at another time if we've got time to do it.
Jessica, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I know Rupert's keen to get back onto the kind of next segment, but that was absolutely brilliant. I always loved talking with you, and lots of insight and thoughts and ideas. And I hope it's, as I'm seeing from some of the comments, that it's helped a lot of other people to think through this as well. So great opportunity here to, during this period, to look at our patterns of behavior and move into the next new paradigm, having made some shifts. So thank you. So Rupert, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. And Jessica, oh my God, how the hell do you follow that? So, I mean, first of all, despite our conversations, I had no idea what you'd been through. So thank you very much for sharing it. I felt really humbled. And the fact you've been able to, fight through the cancer through positive determination, and also your personal story when you're really young as well. And it's interesting because I think all of us, certainly I can, perhaps identify things when I was much younger myself, which has led to repeating patterns of behavior even now. And you sometimes it's going on, and you have to somehow try and switch it off. I really appreciate that. So thank you very much for sharing.
At one point as well, Rupert, that's about I was just looking at, rather than ducking around, I was looking for Jessica's book, and I think I took it into the other room. But I know with Jessica's book around her cancer is having a huge impact with a lot of people, and we all sharing it in that it's actually also changing attitudes within the medical profession as well, which is is quite fascinating. It's shifting some of their patterns about how to treat cancer. So just wanted to mention that, really.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris and Jessica. I've no doubt there will be some other questions at the very end, Jessica, or something that we'll probably try and sneak in some shape or form. So do keep those questions coming, by the way, and I'll do our best to cover those off. Now, in terms of so what we plan to cover next is what we promised for today. So I just have a look at my screen just to see what I promised here, and it's a different part of the room. Okay, so this is basically the next segment now. So we plan to share some insights, top tips, some next steps, touching on funding and government support, a little bit of Q&A, and also what's on next week. So moving on to that part of it. Now, a few of you saw this last week. Just a quick reminder on it, because on one hand, it's got a big negative in it, but on the other part, there is a little bit of a positive part there, because even though things are expected to be pretty tough this year, the fundamentals are that, broadly speaking, Bank of England is actually saying that by this time next year, things will largely have got back to close to where they are before all this started to happen. Obviously, that's assuming there's no second wave and things like that, but we just hope and pray that doesn't actually happen. Basically, in terms of some top tips. Now, I actually wrote an email about this yesterday and today, and one of my lovely clients from before actually very kindly rang me at lunchtime today to say that he didn't think he would realise that the email that I sent was actually very moving, and it had a big impact, because he'd been trying to explain that his daughter, who was running a business, had rather gone into herself and was not contacting a lot of her current clients and past ones. It was a very good reminder that it's about looking outwards as much as possible. So I think, this thing about not going into your cave, for me, is a really big thing. I think when things are a bit tough, our natural instinct is to go in with ourselves. And I think it's especially tough for us, for those of you who are introverts, as it were. And what I would argue is that during core hours, we should be as much as possible speaking to our customers, our past customers, our supporters, advocates, and also potential customers, but mainly just showing you care and you're there for them. Obviously, an obvious statement here about cash flow, but it is very true. And we touched on last week about the importance of good money versus bad money. Clearly, at times like this, you need to preserve cash, but there are things that you should be investing in. Even now, you should be looking to invest in. And that can be anything from a new piece of equipment, which is going to help you to grow and scale moving forward. You could be into marketing, anything which is going to help improve your chances of coming out of this in a very positive way. Because what I can say to you is, if you don't take action, you probably will be in a worse position in 2 or 3 months' time than you are currently now. The other thing is that I think it's been brought home, especially towards the end of last week, is some of the schemes that the government announced were so wrapped up in red tape previously. Not just the government, but also the banks. It was very quite onerous, some of the expectations on businesses. It just meant people finding it really difficult to access finance. With a slight caveat, there's someone I know, in fact, Muriel knows very well because of his son, and she's given me permission to share it, who managed to get about £25,000 from a local authority, basically as a grant, which in effect is cash. It's not a repayable loan, to help him to keep his gymnasium open. So that's an example of what money can be available. There's also a new scheme, which I think is being announced for self-employed people this week, where there may be a bit of an opportunity to get basically some free money. Again, I believe the Revenue will be writing to you about that if you're eligible. And the other thing which we talked about last week is about bounce back loans, and I'll touch on that in just a second. But the fundamental thing is that it is actually a really good time to invest in your business and yourself, fundamentally, so you can put yourself in a better place tomorrow. So, and I'm going to touch now a little bit on the bounce back loans. For those of you who saw this last week, I apologize, but it's such an important thing, this part of it. The deal that's available from the government for businesses, smaller businesses, or micro businesses, is very, very attractive. It means that basically you can borrow up to 25% of your turnover, or provided it's not less than £2,000, and it can be estimated turnover as well. I don't believe it has to be a full year of accounts. So if you were expecting your figures to be quite a bit higher this year before the COVID scenario, then potentially you might be able to argue that case, especially if you've got some management information to back it up. It is basically 100% backed by the government. My understanding is, don't hold me to any of this, obviously this is not my field, but I understand that no personal guarantees are required, and that's a big plus. Chris putting his hand up there. Is there something you want to?
Yeah, no, Rupert, I just I applied for mine a couple of days ago, and in it there was no personal guarantees. So I was just confirming that was correct in the terms and conditions of it.
Yeah, great. I thank you, Chris. And actually, we have as well. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's there's no fees to pay, or interest rather, I should say, in the first 12 months. After that's 2.5% per year, well below the normal rate for borrowing from banks. And because it is 100% guaranteed, in theory, the qualification criteria should be a lot lower. And I think even if you face some personal challenges because of what's going on, I'm not sure that will actually have an impact, whereas normally it would do. So just because your perception may be that you're not eligible, what I would say is, if in doubt, look into it. And what I would say at this point in time, going back to the fact that cash is king, even if you don't think you need all this money straight away, I'd be inclined to apply for it. Obviously, use the money sensibly, but keep some of the money in reserve. And that way you're buying a lot of resilience into your business. So it's just worth thinking about. Sort of moving on a little bit from that as well. Now, just a few things in terms of next steps, in terms of what people generally can do. If you wanted to basically find out a little bit more how you could generate more sales into your business, if you were to click this button here, which is on the home page, it's not very clear here, but basically it's click button for free online training now. You can go to that page and there's a 62-minute video, and we share lots of value there, and also explain how to use LinkedIn. We share lots of market insights. There's no upsell in it whatsoever. You could also book in a 45-minute call with myself and complete a 12-pillar diagnostic questionnaire, and we'll actually go through that with you completely free of charge and see how we can help you. And then moving on from that, I just lost my mouse, which is a bit frustrating. Moving on from that, basically the other thing is, if you want a short call, you're very welcome to book a call, which you can do on the website. And the other part, if you want to take part in future live streams, if you choose the drop-down option on the menu part, which is on the events part over here, or you click the button over here, you can go into the diary system. You can either choose just to book the next session, or you can choose recurring, in which case the system will remind you every week, and you don't have to keep on re-registering. Okay, so you just do it once and remember it, you know, for as many weeks you want to book in for. And if you want to watch previous sessions, for example, Neil was on last week, Michael Romling's on a brilliant one, Steve Hyland, you can go to another page, which is, if you look under TV videos, look at live streams, you can bring up a playlist there, and they're the previous episodes. So Neil, have a look out for his from last week. Steve Hyland, absolutely great. Obviously, Chris, we've had some other guests on here, Michael Romling and so on, have been big contributors to this show. I think Michael might be on today, although he might be having some difficulties, I'm not sure. And then moving on from that, we very much recognise that it is a very lonely journey. We are here for you. We'd like you to feel that we're very much a membership organisation. This is why we're running these events now. You'll notice there isn't really any pitching as far as today. We just want to share value. If you do like what you hear today, what you can do in Facebook, and I think you do something very similar on YouTube, you can set a reminder in there. Also, if you do like what you see, it would be really great if you could like our page, because that actually improves our rankings a lot and gives us more coverage. And also, we've got some announcements coming up in the next few weeks where we're going to give people an opportunity to join a closed group. and be showing yet more value. Again, there's no cost for that part of it. If you're interested in finding out more, just type the words join group in the chat, just literally those 2 words. And although I won't be able to give you more information straight away, what we'll do is we'll make a note of your details and we'll get back in touch with you as soon as we got more information. So literally just the 2 words, join group. Now we're going to come back to some questions in just a moment, but I just want to pick out a few comments to see whether we're missing anything here. So just bear me a second. Right, lovely. So yeah, Renato's made the point about there's quite a bit of latency on YouTube at the moment. I'm afraid I think it is a little bit of a traffic issue. Generally, I know that the European Union's instructed Facebook and YouTube to reduce some of the, to take out the 4K streaming on those channels because it's using up too much bandwidth and there's too much demand at the moment. But Renato, you probably know a lot about that, having working for a very large institution.
Rupert. Yeah, we were having a laugh earlier because your broadband is going a bit slow, and normally you've got the best broadband of everybody. So I think you just have to admit that today yours has gone a little bit.
Oh, I've frozen, haven't I? So
yeah, you keep freezing. It's your broadband. I think the rest of us are fine. It's really great to see you with a problem for a change, rather than you telling me how many.
I can't even blame BT for you. Just
how much broadband width you have.
Thanks, Chris. Lisa, thank you very much indeed for that feedback and throughout. And sorry, Splendid Engineering, can you just, I can't remember your name actually, I really apologise. But actually, it's not as bad as you think. That's a really good point. I'm really glad you asked that. If you go to the government website, search bounce back loans, go to the government website. I know HSBC doesn't insist you have to have bank with them. What they do is they set up a temporary account for you. In fact, they'd be very efficient because we've gone to HSBC and we don't bank with them. And Metrobank, for example, who we're with, they're not currently in the scheme. And they set everything up over the phone for us. So don't give up. Look for HSBC. There probably are other banks as well, but you don't have to bank with them to actually apply. And it's still pretty quick. Okay, and then, okay, Phil, thank you very much. I'm not sure which question that related to. Just give me a second. And it's Daniel. Thanks, Daniel. So I couldn't remember. All right. So moving on from there, because obviously we need to sort of wrap up apart from any closing questions. Chris, do you want to very kindly share what you're going to be talking about next week?
Well, next week, I know you asked me if I would have a conversation with you about leadership. So next week, we're going to talk about elevating leadership into the new world. So I'm going to share some thoughts and ideas. I've been working on this for quite some time because realizing that leadership does need to step up to a new elevated level with the current situations in the world. So I'll be sharing some thoughts around that, around kind of understanding ourselves as leaders more around things like humility and seeking the truth. And so we'll be talking about some of those principles and ideas next week that we can then think about our own leadership and hold up a mirror and look at how we can maybe be a better leader within our work, but within our families and our communities into the new world.
Right, lovely. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Well, here are the contact details now. Obviously, we've been trying to keep track of any questions. Jessica, obviously, if anyone's got a quick question they want to drop in at the very last minute, please type it in now, and we'll try and see whether we can grab Jessica before she runs out the door or runs down to the kitchen and make herself a cup of tea or whatever. But you've got, obviously, those contact details there. But can I just say, let me move the presentation there so we can properly see you. Basically, Jessica, we're so very grateful for your very kind contribution today. It's been really appreciated, very moving. Chris, as always, you've done a brilliant job interviewing. Thank you very much for co-hosting with me today. And I can see I've frozen in time again, so I do apologise. That's a blessing as far as some people are concerned. So thank you very much indeed for joining us today, and we'll look forward to catching up with you next week. Okay, so take care, everyone.
To me, Rupert and Chris, and good luck to everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.